Welcome. My name is LLoyd Burrell. Today at the Healing with Vibration Summit, I'm thrilled to have as my guest Anadi Martel. Anadi is a physicist working in novel ways with sound, light, and brainwaves. His spatial sound processors have been used worldwide by professionals in psychoacoustics, multimedia, and cinema. His work has led to patents in the field of light modulation and in LED-based design. He served as president of the International Light Association from 2011 to 2018, and he recently published the book, Light Therapies, A Complete Guide to the Healing Power of Light. Anadi, welcome.
Thanks, Lloyd. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's a great pleasure to have you on. So you're a physicist, so you're the person to ask about the relationship between light and vibration. So what is the link between light and vibration?
It's very intimate. Actually, you can say that light is nothing but vibration. It's pure energy. The particles of light, what we call photons, are massless. So they're pure energy. They have no mass at all. So if you want to talk about the purest forms of vibration that are available to us in nature around us, light is definitely one of the highest forms.
We could say the pure white light is the highest form of vibration, pure white light, or is it different? How does that work? Different colors have different vibrations.
Well, you're aware that light is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, the same as radio waves. I'm sure you've been talking a lot about those, EMF. They're actually of exactly the same nature, light and radio waves, just that in different parts of the frequency spectrum. And electromagnetic vibrations span an enormous range of frequencies. You can talk about over 70 octaves from one extreme to the other. And so radio waves are around the ones that we commonly deal with mobile devices and so on, are about the gigahertz range, a billion vibrations per second. Light is about 1 million times faster than that. It's in the million billion hertz or pulsations per second. So it's a completely different range of reality. They're exactly the same phenomenon. They're the same photons, but with different energies, because, you know, from quantum mechanics, it's a fact that you can link the energy of a particle to its frequency. It's a directly proportional relation. So photons of electromagnetic waves that have highest energy will have higher frequency. So you can see that the light photons carry much more energy than the radio wave photons. So they will act in very different ways when they interact with matter. And so when we talk about light, of course, we talk about what we perceive through our eyes. And what we perceive is actually about 1 octave in this vast range of electromagnetic frequencies, just one single octave in this very, very wide spectrum. And so it means the frequencies available to us of light span a range of about 1 to 2 from the lowest frequency photons, which are in the red part of the spectrum. And as you change the frequency of those photons, you go through the spectrum of colors. And when you have about twice as much as the red, you start to go in the blue and violet range. And then beyond those two extremes, your eyes don't really perceive those photons anymore. It doesn't mean they're not there. It just means that your eyes are tuned to that particular kind of frequencies. And of course, it's not a coincidence, because that octave of frequencies corresponds precisely to the peak of the emission of our sun. If you look at the spectrum of radiation emitted by the sun, it peaks just in that range of visible light. And it simply shows that life on the planet evolved to fine-tune itself to that peak of energy. And so we developed a sense of vision that's tuned to that greatest energy available from the sun. So it matches naturally. And so you just mentioned white light. And white light is actually a mixture of all those colors from the rainbow. We know that since the classic experiment by Newton, Isaac Newton, who spread white light from the sun with a prism, he found all the colors in it. And then he took a second prism and he applied all those colors. And what he got back was the same white light as originally. So then he proved for the first time that this white light contains all the colors.
This is true. And I remember actually, now you come to say that, I remember seeing that at school and
Yes.
many, many years ago and thinking how amazing that was. And light is amazing when you think about it. And as you say, it's just this notion that we can't see all of the light. We can only see a small portion of it. And then that makes you kind of think, or it makes me think anyway, of this idea, light that harms, light that heals.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to be said about that. Well, the first thing is that light is tremendously important to all aspects of our existence. Actually, basically all the energy available on the planet comes from light, comes from sunlight. And that's what creates all the warmth, all life is entirely caused by the presence of the sunlight. So it means that all life forms are very finely tuned to all aspects of light coming from our sun, both in terms of the frequency spectrum, the specific frequencies that will affect us, and also in terms of the rhythmicity, the cycles of light that we go through on the planet daily and through the year. That's the circadian rhythm, daily cycle of light. So our whole biology is adapted to these rhythms. And so because we're so finely tuned to these spectrums and rhythms, as soon as you start to change them, to disrupt them, then of course our biology starts to get out of tune. And that can lead to all kinds of trouble, which can actually go quite deeply. It can lead to all kinds of chronic illnesses and eventually to things like cancer and so on. So they have been linked to deficient light spectrum or bad connection to the circadian rhythm, to the entrainment, the natural entrainment of the cycle of life. So there are many dimensions to consider.
Yes.
Because as I mentioned, light touches us at all levels. It touches our body naturally. It also touches our mind through the sense of vision. Vision is our main sensorial input. It's been said that about 80% of our sensorial stimulus comes from the sense of vision. So it's the major gate into our perception. So that means that light can be used in very powerful ways to influence our perception and cognition as well. So there's this whole other dimension of using light more at a cognitive level, for psychotherapy, for influencing things like depression and so on. And even if you look at the farthest levels in terms of spirituality, of course, we've always equated light with the highest forms of consciousness. They're synonyms, basically. We talk about enlightenment. So to all people of all times, light has always been synonymous with the highest form of perception of consciousness. So it's quite amazing that you have this same phenomenon, light, that spans all these different dimensions in our life, from the very physical, energetic level, all the way to mind and then through consciousness. So with light, you can really affect all these dimensions depending on the modality with which you will use it.
Yes. Let's talk about the problem, if we can, a little bit first. The problems with light. When does light become a health risk? Because obviously, in this modern world with screens and all kinds of newfangled lighting, which kind of on the face of it looks a good idea. Clearly, it's not. Well, it's clearly to me anyway, but it's not always obvious to many people. So, what are the health risks?
As you say, there are very new risks related to light. And in a way, it's been a very happy coincidence that the first source of artificial light that was used widely was the incandescent light created by Edison over a century ago. And if you look at the spectrum emitted by that light, it's actually very similar to the sun spectrum. It's like a miniature sun. It's a source of heat. So it's a thermal source of heat, just like the sun is. It's got a nice continuous spectrum with not too much blue and a nice tail end in the red and infrared part of the spectrum. So it's very similar to the natural sunlight under which light has evolved for billions of years. So we've been using that light for over a century, and we've become used to the idea that artificial light is fine. There's no risk involved because we've always been using that very natural-looking incandescent light. But the problem with that light, of course, is that it contains a lot of heat, a lot of infrared energy. And what that means is that there's a lot of energy wasted in the heat part of it that you don't see. So when people started to want to work on energy efficiency, to try to minimize the carbon footprint of our societies, they thought, of course, lighting is a very obvious way to fix this. You just create sources of light which remove all that heat and which only emit energy in the visible part of the spectrum, which are much more energy efficient. And so with that goal in mind, new light sources were created in the last few decades, starting with fluorescent lights first. And now, of course, for the last 10 or 20 years, the LED. And the LED, because of all its advantages, is really taking over now as the primary source of lighting. And it turns out that LEDs have completely different properties from sunlight spectrum or from incandescent light. They're actually semiconductor devices, and they're so efficient because they convert quite directly energy into light through a quantum process. And they emit only a specific color. Each LED emits really one short range of colors. And you know that because we have now so many multicolored LEDs around us, red, green, blue, and so on. They're very pure, sharp colors. And of course, that is not suitable for lighting. So what has been done is that in the LED light bulbs that we have now everywhere around us, you have one light source, an LED, which has a pure color, and then you put some phosphor coating on the light that converts that pure color into a wide range, into a whitish color. Because to our eye, whenever you have a mix of different colors, it's perceived as white, as some form of white. And of course, when we talk of white, there are subtleties. There are different types of white. You have more bluish looking white, which is called sometimes cool white. And you have more amber, warm looking white, which is more reddish or yellowish. And so there are different ranges of white, and it matters because when you look at their spectrum, it means they have different proportions of different ratios of blue content versus the red content of the light they emit. And the reason why this is important is that it turns out that the blue part of the spectrum is really critical to our visual system, because that's what we use to synchronize with the circadian rhythm I mentioned, the daylight rhythm. We know only fairly recently, since less than 20 years, that we have special receptors in the eye that are connected directly between the retina and the hypothalamus, the core of the brain that regulates our hormonal balance and our inner rhythms. And these special sensors in the retina are perceive specifically the blue color, deep blue. So they use the blue part of the spectrum to synchronize your whole inner clock. And so if you look at LEDs, to come back to them, the technology that we use mostly today work with a blue LED source because it's been found to be the most energy efficient of all. Actually, there was a Nobel Prize given last year to 3 Japanese physicists who created this first blue LED. And it's still today the most efficient form of LED that we have. So at the core of every LED light bulb is an intense blue light source. And so necessarily, even if you put phosphorus to spread that light, you still have, if you look at the spectrum, often a peak of this blue light that comes through. And it means that this type of light is especially potent to influence our circadian rhythm because it emits light precisely at the color to which these receptors are sensitive. So the same intensity of light as would appear from an incandescent light and an LED light, if you look at their respective spectrums, you'll find that the LED light can influence your daily rhythm by a factor of sometimes 2, 3, and even more. So it has a much more powerful impact on our whole biorhythms. And this is a very new subject. We're only starting to learn about this. It's only been discovered, as I mentioned, in the last 10, 20 years. It's intensely studied now. There are many, many biologists and medical professionals studying this whole field of biorhythms and chronobiology. It's a very important field. And we now know that it really brings to focus the importance of the proportion of blue light in our environment.
Yes.
And originally, the LED light bulbs had a lot of blue because this was the most efficient, energy-efficient formula. Now, since more knowledge is coming about the effects on our chronobiology, the industry is starting to become more aware. Now we have a wider choice of LED light bulbs. You can find the more warm white color bands, which means these have a lower proportion of blue, which means they are more suitable to be used, especially at nighttime when it's easiest to disrupt our circadian rhythm. So the spectrum of light is one key issue. You need a light which has a balanced spectrum, and you need to know when in the day to apply it to respect this natural cycle of light under which life has evolved.
And so there's clearly these problems. All is not what it seems with light. That's for sure. And then there's these issues which you've raised, and then there's the kind of EMF issues as well, which I've talked about before, notably because with CFLs, which are kind of less would seem to be very popular at one time, although the LEDs, as you say, seem to be the more popular form of lighting now. But they're still on sale, the CFLs, and there's a whole lot of problems with them, including mercury. And also, but the other issue is with a lot of these LEDs, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is they've got things like switch mode power supplies in them, and they're creating dirty, what we call, you do know because you know Magda Havas, dirty electricity, the work, I'm sure, dirty electricity in these frequencies as well. So that's just as an aside. But let's talk about, if we can please, light therapy, how we can use light then in a positive way. So, we've understood that there are dangers, and there are clearly particular dangers at certain parts of the day, because you were talking about this circadian rhythm and the blue light and how that impacts us. But let's talk about, how we can use light in a positive way. Phototherapy, which I know you talk about in your book, so if you can talk to that, please.
Right, that's really my main field. Because it touches all dimensions of our life, light can be used in many, many different ways. And there are many forms of light therapy that exist and are available. So it's a vast subject. And so it goes from the purely cellular effect of light, light on our skin, on our cells, and also to the visual effects of light, light as we perceive it through the eye. So these are completely different ways of using light, and they lead to very different types of light therapies. So it's important not to mix them. Sometimes people tend to lump light therapy in a single phenomenon, and it's not the case at all. There are many, many different modalities of light therapies, and each have completely different application areas. So the main types will be the light for the cells to influence our cellular metabolism. And there are a variety of such therapies, and it's been known since fairly recently, 20, 30 years, that light has a direct influence on the mitochondria in each of our cells. The light can modulate or increase the capacity of mitochondria to generate the ATP cells, the fuel with which our whole bodies work. So you can use light to boost the production of this ATP in our cells. And we know that only specific frequencies of light are most efficient to achieve this mitochondrial stimulation. And these frequencies of light are mostly in the deep red and near infrared part of the spectrum. So you will find many types of light therapy devices emitting deep red and near infrared light. And it's the whole field called photobiomodulation. And it has many, many different areas of use. It was originally used more for sports medicine to heal tendon injuries and so on. And now we're finding that it can be applied actually to a very wide variety of healing issues. So, for example, it's used a lot on the skin now. You see it in beauty treatments. It's becoming mainstream now to use LED lights of different colors, yellow and amber and red, on the skin. You can buy these light masks everywhere on the web. You can even use it to treat the brain directly. It turns out that this near-infrared light will actually go through the cranium. Part of it, maybe 2-3% will penetrate the cranium, which means you can stimulate directly neurons in the brain. And so there's a whole field of transcranial light therapy where you can help people with strokes or depression with this type of direct stimulation of neurons. So these are just some examples. That there's so many. Actually, if you look at the literature, every month there are new. We're finding new ways of using this light stimulus to boost our cellular metabolism. So this is one whole range of light therapy. And then one other range that's very well known in the mainstream media is the type of bright light that you would use in the morning to try to alleviate SAD. So this has been used in the past 20 years, and it's very well known now to the point that sometimes people equate light therapy with this very particular form of light therapy, which would be more specifically called bright light therapy. And this type of light therapy is designed to use the visual system. It doesn't work on your skin like photobiomodulation. It's directly meant to influence your circadian rhythm through action on these blue sensing cells I just mentioned. And the purpose of this is to try to compensate the fact that due to, in our modern societies, often we are light deficient. If we work in an office the whole day in a northern country where there's less sunlight, we tend not to get enough bright light in the midday to reset, to entrain our inner clock, which it's designed to be influenced only by this very bright light of midday. So when we are missing this bright light, we start to have a desynchronized inner rhythm. And It can lead to simple things like bad, disturbed sleep, or feeling groggy or so on. But the trouble is, if you do this long term over years in your life, then it leads to chronic issues. And it's been linked, as I mentioned, to even some forms of cancer and diabetes and deep chronic types of problems for which really medicine often doesn't have many efficient tools. So you can see that if you use light properly in that sense to try to re-entrain those rhythms, you can have this very deep impact to bring us back more in balance with the natural rhythms. So again, this is one other form of using light, bright light therapy. And then there's still another range of light therapies which are based more on the specific properties of colors. That's called chromotherapy, color therapy. And usually those forms of therapies, of course, they will work mostly with the visual system. And they are not like bright light therapy just influencing your hormonal balance. They will influence mostly your visual cortex, your sense of vision. And it's much more sensitive. Our sense of vision is extremely sensitive. We can perceive, it's been calculated that you can perceive as few as 2 or 3 photons of light, which is a tiny, tiny amount of energy. So our visual system is extremely, exquisitely sensitive to colors. And our whole perception is deeply influenced by colors. And everybody loves to see the rainbow colors. We're all fascinated by it. It's kind of built in our brains to have this fascination with pure colors. So there's a whole range of therapies which are based on this powerful impact of colors on our perception. So again, it's a whole different world of light therapies.
Yes.
As you can see, there's many, many different ranges of applications.
There are, and I was just looking through your book online on Amazon, and it is a vast subject. One which I've explored a little bit, but there is really a lot to discover here, and it is important. And another thing that you talk about is using light for brainwave entrainment. Can you speak to that?
Right. So light in itself is a form of vibration, extremely high frequency vibration. But it's also a perfect medium to modulate. So there are many techniques which start from a source of light and then will superimpose on that source of light a rhythm, a much lower frequency rhythm. And there's a whole range of very low frequency rhythms that are built in our biology, in our body. They're rhythms that are closer to the 1 cycle per second range rather than a million billion like light itself. So if you take a source of light and you pulse it at this much lower frequency, then you can entrain your visual sense to that particular rhythm. And it's a universal phenomenon that when you are exposed to a sensorial stimulus, which is in the same range of frequencies as one of your own biorhythm, there's a natural tendency to fall in sync, to essentially resonate with that external stimulus. And actually, that doesn't only apply to light. It can be done with sound, it can be done with touch, with all our senses. But it turns out to be especially powerful with light because light is our primary sensory gate. So when we use pulsed light, we can quite efficiently entrain our biorhythms. And one range of biorhythms, which is very useful and very efficient to entrain in that way, is the range of brainwaves. It's the range of, usually it's considered to be between 1 and 30 hertz for the main brainwave bands. You've all heard of the different brainwave ranges: alpha waves, theta waves, beta, delta. They each correspond to specific state of mind. And So when you're exposed to pulsation in one of those ranges, your brain will have a natural tendency to start to resonate. And what that means is that it will also have an influence on your inner state, because you will start to shift towards the mental state corresponding to that particular frequency. So you can see that you have a way through this external stimuli to try to work to influence your inner state. And this has been applied in many different ways. It's the whole field of brainwave entrainment. And there are many studies, many devices that you can find. And it's been shown that it can lead to very effective forms of therapy. It can be used in many ways. And this is actually the type of work that I myself have been specializing in. I created particular ways to modulate light, where you can modulate not only the intensity of light, as is commonly done, you can also modulate the color of light, like alternate between colors at a specific frequency. And that's a whole other form of brainwave entrainment that's quite fascinating, that I've been working with, which is less common. And you can, of course, combine both to have more sophisticated ways to influence brainwaves.
Yes. Yeah, so it's fascinating. It's a fascinating subject, and it seems we're, as you say, we've still got a lot to learn. But so you're an expert on this, and we want to know your tips. What your tips are for vibrational healing, with light. So if you could, give us some tips that people can follow here.
Well, I would say the most simple and most obvious is to try to reconnect with our natural relation to light, which we have often lost, which is often disrupted in our modern life. And so that means a few practical things, like it's important to realize that you really need some sunlight as much as possible every day, and bright sunlight. So it means going outside in the sun. And you also need even a bit of ultraviolet. We tend to be very careful to mask all ultraviolet light. We use sunscreens, we use dark glasses, because, of course, of the danger of skin cancer, which is very real. But there's always a balance in everything. You have to be aware that we still need some of that ultraviolet to stimulate production of vitamin D, which is essential to our health. So there's also this aspect of exposing some skin to bright sunlight, of course, in a very intelligent way. You never want to burn, because then you get into that risk cancer. But you can have a little dose, and to get some of that vitamin D. So it's a simple and important key to health through light.
Mm-hmm. Where are you on the question of sunglasses? Should we be wearing sunglasses? Should we be protecting our eyes from the sun in that way, or not? Is there a yes or no, or is it more nuanced than that?
It is more nuanced. I certainly wouldn't say that you shouldn't use sunglasses, because it would be very irresponsible. You can damage your retina with intense sunlight and UV and so on. It's just a matter of sometimes taking them out for a certain time, so that your eyes can get the full spectrum of light, at least for a few minutes once in a while. So personally, I only use sunglasses when it's really absolutely needed, when it's very, very bright. But most of the time outside, I will not use them. But it's a personal thing. And again, it's always a matter of balance.
Is it not better to wear a hat? Because I'm not a big one for sunglasses. I like natural things, and so because I live in France, in the summer the sun gets very hot, and so I wear a hat. Yeah. And actually, even though I've got blue eyes now, because I don't really wear sunglasses apart from, if I'm going on the water, then you've got that reverberation. Mm-hmm. Then I really find that I do need sunglasses. But other than that,
snow also, white snow.
Snow also, yes.
In Canada, we get that.
Yes. Otherwise, I'm finding that a hat is better because I'm not chilled. I'm not. It seems more natural anyway, and I can withstand the sun. I'm quite happy, even with very bright sun.
Yeah, if you can live with it, it's indeed preferable.
Yes.
Then, of course, there's a whole question of light in our homes, ambient light. So I talked about LED light bulbs. And now we're kind of forced to use LED light bulbs even legally because the old incandescent lights are being phased out. In many countries, it's already done. And many people working with light therapy and light and healing are not quite happy about that shift. It's been implemented much too quickly without fully understanding the biological implications of doing that. So at the very least, you can select LED light bulbs which are of the warm white type with a color temperature inferior to 3000 K, so more like 2700 K is typical of the warm white. And if you do that, it means that at nighttime in your home, you will have a much lesser proportion of the blue light that is disruptive. So it's at least a simple thing that you can do. And same thing with computer screens. It's not healthy to have a bright computer screen late at night because computer screens have a high proportion of blue. Otherwise, you will not get a nice color balance. So there are ways to mitigate that. You can use screensavers like Flux on PC, or the Mac has its own built-in system to filter out the blue light, reduce the blue light at night. And so these apps will automatically, when the end of the day comes, reduce gradually the amount of blue. So that's certainly a good thing. You can also use blue blocking glasses. They look orange or yellowish. You can easily find those on the web. So these are all things that will help to minimize the disruption of the circadian rhythm through artificial lighting.
The blue blocking glasses, is it any particular technology, or does it need to be dark orange or lighter? I mean, how does that work? What do we need to look at when we're buying those?
There are different qualities, of course, in that thing. It depends where it starts to filter out the blue, and I mean you have to analyze the particular brands, but normally those that are specifically advertised as blue blocking for use at night, you expect that they will have some proper filtering. And some are very inexpensive. It might be doubtful how sharp the filtering is. The higher quality ones will be more reliable. So it's like anything else, it's up to... Okay. So another aspect that we can get into is with LED light bulbs, you mentioned the factor of dirty electricity. Because of the switch mode power supply, they generate spikes that will be transmitted to your whole home electrical system. So that is one issue, certainly. But another less known issue is the fact that they also generate light noise. They generate not only electrical noise, but also light noise. And what is light noise? Light noise is when the light that is emitted is unstable. And if it's flickering at a high frequency, your eye will not perceive it at all. Our eyes stop perceiving flickering around 50, 60 hertz. So if you have a light that's pulsing at a higher frequency than that, the eye will not see it. And it's like anything else. It's not because you don't see it or feel it that it doesn't have an impact. Anybody working with vibrational medicine knows very well that each frequency has an impact on different part of our system. So it turns out that many LED light bulbs emit light that's highly pulsing at higher frequencies. Some it's only 1 or 200 hertz, some are more in the kilohertz range. And there's a very wide variety of quality in the light of these LED light bulbs. Some are actually well designed and they're quite stable light. and some are terrible. They're real stroboscopes at high frequency. And when you have a light bulb that's acting like a stroboscope like that, you may not perceive it consciously, but it's like anything else. It's a kind of stress on your system. It's a bit like some people are hypersensitive to radio fields. Most of us are not so much, so we can kind of absorb it and keep functioning. Few people will become sick from it. It's the same from lights. There are some few hypersensitive people who, if the light is flickering in the slightest range, they will get migraines and eye strain and so on. Most of us will be able to work even with some flickering. We will just marshal through. But if you do that on the long term, it's one more stress, environmental stress on your system. And really, there's no need for it because you can get light bulbs which don't have this. So it's an issue of, again, selecting the proper products to put in your home. And the trouble is that it's not so obvious to distinguish because there are no standards. It won't be written on the label of what you buy how much light noise it emits. And that there's actually quite a controversy going on right now in the lighting industry. People working with light and healing know very well that you have to be careful of that issue, and they're pushing to have standards established. And hopefully it will come within a few years. There's a gradual shift in that direction. But in the meantime, the only way to select is to find a way to make this high frequency flickering perceptible. And so you have meters, you have special instruments that will convert light into a reading that you can analyze. And often the most direct way is to convert light into sound, because of course our ears are sensitive to much higher frequencies, so we will directly hear whatever pulsing is present in the light. And so there are professional instruments that do that are quite expensive. So when I saw this issue with some colleagues, we've designed some inexpensive instruments to detect this, light noise detectors, to convert light into sound. And so you can apply it and use it with light bulbs that you buy at the hardware store. And then you have a way to distinguish, at least to remove from the environment the noisy light sources. And it looks like this. It's a little device. It's called the Light B. Very simple thing. It just converts light into sound. And this issue sometimes is not clear to people because they don't see it. But when you hear what this noise is, it makes things much more clear to most people. So I'll just give you an example. I have here a LED light source, headlight. And let's see what kind of pulsation it's emitting. I'll just turn this on. I guess you can hear.
That doesn't sound good.
It sounds very bad. It's very unpleasant. So you have that light that's continuously emitting this terrible noise. And if you have that in your house, in your environment, then you're exposed the whole day to it.
So if you just switch your device on now with that light you've got in the room there, what does it do?
Well, with sunlight, of course, there's no pulsing, so it's very stable. With incandescent light, it's very stable because incandescent lights, they have a little 5 to 7% flickering, but it's a smooth flickering because the filament reacts very slowly. But LEDs react instantly. They react in nanoseconds. So whatever noise is in the power supply, the switch mode power supply that's inside the LED is present, will be directly converted into light noise. So that's where the quality comes in. The same light bulbs which have cleaner electrical systems usually will have a more stable supply, and so they will have a more stable light. And it can be done because I regularly checked in the stores what's available, and you find maybe a third of light bulbs are quite stable, and then others have little noise, others are terrible. And it's completely unpredictable. That's what's unfortunate. I can't even recommend a specific brand because it will change even from month to month, because the manufacturers don't have to comply to any particular standard. They change design constantly, and so it varies.
And where can we find that meter?
But on my website, it's sensora.com, and it's about $100. I try to make it as inexpensive as possible, so it's available to people.
Okay, fantastic. Listen, we're pretty much out of time. Anything you just want to say very quickly before we close off? Well,
I'm happy that people get to know more about the power of light, to just realize the importance, the essential importance to our well-being of healthy light, and to try to surround yourself with beautiful sources of light using beautiful pure colors, and to have a healthy rhythm, getting a lot of sunlight. So just remember that light is not just a purely utilitarian factor in our life. It's actually the source of our life.
Light is a form of vibration. Anadi Martel, thank you so much for being at the Healing with Vibration Summit.
It's been a pleasure, LLoyd.
And thank you, listener, viewer, for being here today. My name is LLoyd Burrell from electricsense.com. Thank you so much. Until next time. Bye-bye.